The Hangout on Air is live. All right. Well, let's see. We are missing Nicole and Gio. Gio, I think, did click on the invitation that she will be here tonight. Let me see. Oh, this is the night that Nicole may not be here. Okay. So I think we should go ahead and get started because, as usual, I have enough questions to keep us busy. So welcome everybody to the Global Black Feminist Reading Circle. My name is Michelle Odom. I'm located in Brooklyn, New York, and I am here with our Session 10 reading selection, Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis-Benn. You can learn more about the Global Black Feminist, where all of our videos are archived on YouTube, as well as a community page on Google+, and a public page on Facebook. And tonight we're going to focus on chapters 26 to 32. But before we get to that, let's go around and introduce the other conversationalists in our group. Venita, you were here first.
Good evening. My name is Venita. I'm joining you from Cromwell, Connecticut. Welcome.
Welcome. And Kim?
Hi, I'm Kim. I'm in New York and glad to be here. Hi, everybody.
Hi. Kim, just move your camera a little bit so we can see more of your face. Yeah, perfect. Okay. And Leonie, you're muted.
Hello, everybody. My name is Leonie Smith, and I'm joining you today from Rochester, New York. I'm usually joining you from Toronto, Ontario, Canada.
Getting closer and closer. Welcome. All right. We are coming toward the end of session 10, including tonight. We just have 3 weeks left. We conclude on April 17th. One thing we have not done is schedule any private time for ourselves. And so maybe next week, if we have everybody here, we can think about that a little bit. And next week's facilitator actually is going to be Kim Brandon. So without further ado, let me read the summary for chapters 26 to 32. Love, abusive love, forgiving love, protective love, funky love, and the love of money, a many-splendored thing, come into view in chapters 26 to 32 of Here Comes the Sun by Nicole Dennis-Benn. The distorted love Dolores has for Margot is on view in chapter 26 as the mother blames Margot for Thandi's rebelliousness and exposes her belief that she was fixing the elder daughter's lesbian tendencies by selling her body to men. Margot retaliates by choking her mother, but falls short of killing her as she clings to a yearning for her mother's love. The love story between Margot and Verdine continues in chapter 27, with Margot apologizing for abandoning her friend and bearing her lover's anger and slaps. Here we are challenged to consider the power of love and forgiveness. The love story between Thandi and Charles is at the center of action in chapters 28 to 32 as Thandi reveals details of her rape and Charles exacts revenge on the rapist. This revelation brings out all manner of greed and violence and a debate about the value of love over money. As Margot moves to protect the hotel's development plans by placing a reward on Charles's head. Townsmen beat up Miss Violet. Dolores pressures Thandi to turn Charles in. And Sweetness threatens to expose the setup of Miss Novia Scott Henry if Boss Lady doesn't call off the wolves. So let's just kind of go through the questions erratically. You choose the question that you want to start us off with, or you want to read, and we'll try it like that. Venita, since you were the first one here, you want to pick a question?
Yes.
And we can't see your face either. Can you
I'm
move
on my
your
iPad, and it's a little different than my desktop or my laptop. So let's see. And it keeps sliding.
Okay.
Can you see down?
Yeah.
Okay, Funky Love, which is where we are. Margot remembers watching Grandma Merle sew.
That's number 3?
Yes, number 3. How do women today bond with children?
Venita, before you start, Geo is just coming in. So let's Geo do her introduction.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi,
Sorry.
Geo.
Hey, sorry to interrupt.
It's all right.
I'm
Hi,
Georgette
Gio.
Moses. Hey, Kim. I'm Georgette Moses, joining you guys from Columbia, South Carolina.
Glad to see you. Gio, we're just going to go through and have everybody pick the question they want to read and, move through it like that. So we are on the first question, and Venita chose question 3.
Oh, okay.
Okay, Venita. Yeah, please.
Margot remembers watching Grandma Merle sew. How do women today bond with children? What skills are we passing on to the children? I thought that question was interesting when I read through all 3 of the questions. That's something I think is really missing, at least in my experience in my generation, is that I don't think we're taught very much. We didn't have anything special to bond with. On the islands, they sew a lot. My husband's mother is a fabulous seamstress because that's what they do. Her mother taught her how to sew. Her mother taught her how to sew. My grandmother was a seamstress. My mother's mother, a Southern woman from South Carolina. She was taught how to sew. I was never taught how to sew. They were taught how to knit. I'm not a knit and crochet, but I actually learned that on my own. It wasn't passed down sitting with my mom, or my aunt or my grandmother learn these things. So I in my generation, I was not taught any of those special skills. I think it's fabulous. I wish I did know those sewing skills. Just the things they knew, they're just invaluable. And today, I happen to have sons, and my husband did pass down some of his skills for those that wanted to pay attention, because he's an electrical contractor, actually at the School of Engineering. However, he taught the boys, how to fix things because he fixes all this cool stuff, which saves us bundles. And he knows how to do all this other happy stuff, install this and do that. And he taught them things. And today, looking at social media on a large scale, I don't know what's being passed down. It's hard for me to speak about the millennials or Generation Z, which is this new generation. I guess is coming from the kids born in the 90s. I don't hear of them talking about any skills, and I work around different young ladies from different parts of the world, from Colombia, from Puerto Rico. Where you expect to hear these things, but no, they don't possess any of those old skills at all.
Well, today what I see a lot of is cell phones and other kinds of small technology gadgets in the hands of small children. And so there are arguments on both sides of that, but surely some of them are more competent at utilizing technology than older folks. But you and I are the same generation, Venita, and I did learn how to sew. Not from my mother. My mother wasn't crafty in that kind of way. She couldn't sew or crochet or do any of that stuff.
My mother good. Don't mess with Loca.
And she was a music teacher. So the one thing that she could pass on, I couldn't seem to learn. But there was a professional seamstress who was a member of our church when I was a teenager, and make a lot of clothes for my mother. And she taught me how to sew. And and I'm really glad she did. Like, there was a long period, maybe a decade or more, when I didn't sew at all, mostly because of all the drama and trauma and loss going on in my life. But recently, since I've been losing this weight and looking all cute and everything, my clothes don't fit. And so I've been able to pull out, I've got this little, I call it the child size sewing machine. I got this little cheap sewing machine on Groupon. And you can hold it in one hand, it's so light. Nevertheless, it works. And so I've been using it to take in clothes and things like that. So I'm glad that I have the skill, and I guess like riding a bike, it never leaves you.
Well, those are basic survival skills. That's why I mentioned the fact technology is fabulous, and I appreciate the technology. But going back to the parable of the sower, we'll need more than technology. We'll need know how to knit some socks, maybe knit a sweater or a scarf or some gloves. We'll need to know how to sew some clothes, because we might not be able to, of course, buy clothes out there. We'll, may have to, use old clothes to make new clothes with. So I'm talking about, for me, those, I can learn the technology, but those skills are invaluable. And those are skills that I think we're going to need, and that's the part, that's what I find missing. Technology is going to go but so far. But once again, going back to Parable of the Sower, Octavia Butler, God bless her heart, we're going to need to know how to sew, make something to eat out of nothing. Those are the skills that are really.
We need a lot. Anybody else on this question?
Well, I think one of the things that you get from sewing and being at your mother's knee or at an aunt's knee is they teach you your culture. They teach you who you are and where your morals stand, where you should be ethically. And Facebook and YouTube and all of that stuff doesn't teach our children that. And so I'm always concerned with, you see these little girls and they're like, oh, they need blood injections, or they have absolutely no idea that their appearance is not who they are. And so it's sad that we need to go online to reach our kids. And I don't know if I told this story before, but one of the things that my daughter and I talk a lot, and she's sick of my talking actually, but I still do it. And so she was over her boyfriend's house, and he wanted to watch Tarzan, and she said, "Oh boy, you can't watch Tarzan. You can't watch Tarzan, especially never in my mother's house, because she's going to ask you, why is it that Tarzan comes to Africa, and as smart as Africans are, how's this white man going to teach them anything?" And so she was telling me this, and I was just so proud. I was beaming. I was just like, "Oh, she gets me." So I think that that's what you get when you're sitting with your kid and you're just randomly talking about everything and nothing. So, but I do feel like my voice to my daughter is smaller than my mother's voice was to me, because she is always on some sort of social media.
Wow. Thank you.
That's where you get all the stories. The stories we used to get.
Venita, let's see if anybody else wants to respond, because I'm concerned about the time now. Anybody else on that question?
I mean, I think that I don't know. I see how my friends who are my age, and, some of them have older kids, some of them have younger kids, and I don't get how people parent these days. Like, I don't get it. It's like people make it harder for themselves, because kids are so heavily scheduled for everything. It's like you don't actually get time to spend with your kids. So it's like somewhere someone decided that it's more important that they go to Little League or dance class or whatever. Like, they have to have 2-3 things in the evening. And it's like kids live their whole lives between like 3 and 10 o'clock. Like, they're in school otherwise. And it's like during that time, half the time parents are usually working and, working until 5, 6, not available. And then the remainder of the time, it's like the kids in the activity. So I don't know why I honestly don't understand the choice, but so I think that there isn't a whole lot being taught, or being passed on, like Venita was saying, being a seamstress is the thing that's been in my family for as long as there's memory in my family. My grandmother would sell notions at the market and would take the bundle and put it on her head and bring it to market. And now for my family that stayed in Jamaica, they own a series of sewing notion shops. So it has been passed on to the next generation. That's like around my age. I don't know where it's going to go after that, but I don't see, it's not even so much with the parents, because I don't think that children have to so much, like, children are not like around family. Like, that's the whole thing. Like, they're just not around family anymore. It doesn't necessarily have to be the mother, like a mother and father or whatever, but there isn't any sense. All of my nieces and nephews were raised in the family home. We were all raised together, and that doesn't even happen anymore. So I don't know what's being passed on, especially when it seems like parents and children don't get to actually be together, other than that they sleep in the same house.
Thank you. Theo, anything?
Well, I don't have any daughters to pass anything to, but what I did have to pass was teaching my younger son, how to thread a needle. Because I am a seamstress. I learned how to sew from my mom. She didn't have a sewing machine, and she used to make our pillows and curtains and just about anything we needed. And so when I was able to sew, she found a secondhand sewing machine from somewhere. And then I made her, she'd come home on Saturday with a pattern and some material and say, hey, I want to wear this for Sunday. Oh my God. And I did it because I was young. All my brain cells still work, so I could do it. I don't have to do that now though. But I was
Right.
thinking about my granddaughters. And so the older one, who's just turned 5, was inspired by my sewing machine. And so she got a little toy sewing machine for Christmas, but she does not have time to sew with grandma because she's busy going to a soccer and ballet and basketball. And she's
Uh-huh.
just
Uh-huh.
5. So yeah, I get what Leonie is saying about that.
Yeah.
And the little one who's just now 2, we spent uh the whole birthday celebration for her older sister dancing. So that's how we were bonding. And what I was passing on to her, just that too, enjoy your body and movement. So it's little things. And just like Kim was saying, it doesn't seem like they're listening and paying attention to you, but they are. And then when you hear the conversation they're having with their friends, you're like, oh, yeah, so you were listening to me while I was talking till I was blue in the face, you know. And it's just making your voice as pertinent as Facebook or Instagram or whatever it is that they're on right now. They may not think it's important until boom, that problem pops up in their life. And, oh, what did mama say? Oh, she said that, or they call you up and, well, how did you say I'm supposed to hook up these jumper cables to jump this car? They call mom for that. So you have to be creative and making time instead of time making you. You know what I'm saying? Instead of the world taking everything from what's important in your life and your children's lives, no matter how old they are, because someday they'll come back and say, hey, Ma, I have this problem, you know, and you want to be that voice that they listen to at that time of need. So, yeah, that's all I got.
Thank you. Venita, you want 1 minute to wrap it up or give us your final comment?
Excuse me?
Do you want 1 minute to wrap up the
Oh
conversation?
no, I'm all set. I just wanted to mention the fact that that's how stories were passed on through that bonding time with grandma. She used to tell me little things, and otherwise, and we had time because camp backyard, camp kitchen, camp sewing machine. So
Okay.
no, that's the way it was. So she shared a lot of stories and a lot of the old sayings and words that she used. I can remember them. I reckon, you know, down yonder,
Yes. Yes.
why you puny? Now you haven't heard the word puny in a while. So those are a lot of things and just little stories. That's all I want to say. It was a great time. It was a great time.
Yeah, thank you. All right, Kim, you were the second one in the hangout tonight. Why don't you choose the question?
I'm not sure. I have two. Okay. I'm just going to choose number 14.
Okay.
Thandi was able to make love to Charles inside a soccer boat without fighting him the way she did the first time. How'd this happen? What changed for her? What does this scene suggest Thandi thinks about Dolores's counsel that nobody loves a black girl?
Mm-hmm. Well, I would say I would say after after Charles whipped Clover's behind, that Thandi felt protected by him. And I think as hard as it is to look at the consequences that Charles is going to have to deal with for killing that man, and I don't really personally believe he killed him. It took the ambulance a long time to get there.
Neither, yeah.
And, I think that's a significant detail because it took the ambulance a long time to get to my dad when he was having his final heart attack. And I have always believed that, if they had not taken 20 minutes to get around the corner, they may have been able to save his life. So that may be the case with Clover as well. Anyway, Charles is feeling guilt and he's going to have to deal with the consequences. So I hate to see that part. And Thandi did try to stop him from doing it. But, I think that there is just something that is just so sexy about a man beating up another man.
Feminism be damned. Sorry, Michelle had to throw that one in there.
Yes. And I think Thandi, when she saw the wild beast in Charles, she was just beside herself. It was just too much. So I think that she then felt safe with him. And that's why she didn't, have that kind of reaction that she had the first time. She didn't have to fight him. And I would also say that it says to me that Thandi hasn't yet bought into Dolores's view that nobody loves a Black girl. I think she's open to the possibility that she is in fact lovable and Charles loves her. That's what I'd say.
Well, good.
Anybody else? Number 14.
I guess the only thing I would add is that I guess once you know that this may be the last time you see him for a while, it's like this complete abandon where you just throw yourself into the moment. And so I wonder if she just surrendered to just taking in as much of, being with him in the boat as possible. So I just think that it was just a love that she was threatened, so she doesn't know when she'll see him again, especially if somebody finds him. So he's really in a hard spot, and it's all because of her. So not all because of her. You could see it as it's because of her, but like you said, the guy probably died because he was evil.
Works for me. Anybody else?
I think Thandi has been quiet for a long time, so she's observed a lot of things without uttering a single word. She knows that Meryl's crazy as hell. She knows that Dolores crazy as hell. She knows that Margot that almost lost her mind is trying to keep her mind and keep her together. And Thandi just simply said, you know what? I don't care what you say. Look, girl, I'm going after Charles. Charles is wonderful in every way. He treats her tender. She knows she can trust him. And pretty much I believe that's what's on Tandy's mind. People are underestimating Tandy. Remember, she's sitting around, although she's quiet, hasn't said much, she's watching all this crazy. And even when little people are little, when they're 4 and 5 and 6 years old, I knew crazy when I saw it. So we don't know what. No, I'm serious. I was just observing that way, and I'm very sensitive to feelings, what's going on around me. But people underestimate Tandy. They underestimate how she feels, because she hasn't really said a lot about how she feels. So she's obliging Dolores, I believe, as she usually listens to whatever. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, girl, no, Charles is a good thing, and she's loving him. And he's a wonderful guy. I really love Charles too. And if I was Tandy, I'd go for it. I mean, he's a good, warm person, So I don't know if it's that complicated. I don't think she thinks that complicated. And she's a teenager. She's not getting into all that other stuff. Charles is hot. Dolores is crazy.
Well said. Well said.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Nicole.
Nicole.
Hi, Nicole.
Welcome.
Nicole.
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the delay. I've meetings and they've taken a little longer. Yeah, they've taken a little longer, but I couldn't miss it. I had to rush right in. Yeah.
Well, introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here as always. My name is Nicole Wilson. I am joining tonight from College Station, Texas.
College Station, Texas. All right. We, Nicole, are kind of erratically going through the list of questions with everybody just choosing the one that we want. So we have already looked at question 3, and we are now on question 14. And I just want to pause and have a little reading moment related to question 14. From the part that says, let's see, you think because Charles say him love you, that you worth something? You think because him say him want you, that him mean it? That is not one thing him after. And when him get it, him run. What is this love? You don't know nothing about no love. Love is foolish. You ever see love put running water in a pipe? You ever see love build a roof over we head? You ever see love give free education to those children whose parents can't afford school fee? You ever see love full up we cupboard? You ever see love hand we visa so we can go anywhere far from this rap? What can love do for you, How you gonna love a stranger when you don't even know what love is? Him will just take advantage of you and walk away. You have to get your return in dollars, not cents. And besides, who gonna want a naive girl like you? Suppose him did really want you. Could you really love somebody who is an absolute fool when it come on to these things? Somebody who green? You wouldn't want that, and neither would he. You giving him everything for free. Boys like stupid girls like that. They take one look at your black face and know you're desperate enough for you. Spread your legs at the first compliment. They see your true color before you tell them your name. They know they can tell you anything, and your black self believe it and accept it, because we so used to getting to leftovers. Who you know really love a black girl for more than what's between her legs? You is a pretty black girl, but it's my duty as your mother to teach you these things. Put something in your head, child. You know how much you could really get? 10,000 US dollars. That can take you from here to eternity. Pay for your education and everything. Use your head, child. You can't place more value on this boy and his foolish love over money. If it means so little to you, then you'll lose everything. Remember this, nobody love a black girl, not even herself. Now get up and go get your pay. So I say that to say Dolores really came down hard with this message that nobody can love a Black girl. And so, and we can see how that message has been transmitted to Thandi her entire life. So I think it's hugely significant. I mean, I hear what you're saying, Venita, about children recognizing crazy when they see it, but I think it takes a really special kind of personality or intelligence or something to be able to filter out that kind of a negative message coming from somebody as influential as your mother.
Well, yeah, that's pretty heavy, and I've heard that before, almost word for word. In my experience was colorism in my family, not out there. In my family, among uncles and aunts and whatever. And from a child, I used to sit back and it just seemed like they always found something negative. Even if you weren't a dark girl, it was like no one ever picked out the positive things. It always seemed like because they were so bitter about their own lives, they could only find something negative. So it was negative if you were a dark-skinned girl telling you that you were Black or your hair was quote unquote nappy, was the word used, which I absolutely despise that word. If you were the lighter tone child, it's like, why don't you put that child outside so she can get some sun? Because she's yalla. It was all, and that's negative.
Wow.
So it was just like and if you're a child and you're hearing these things, I just thought they was crazy. Maybe that's just me. It just all sounds crazy to me. It's just always negative. So it does affect that dark. I have a person in my family that it really affected her and how she viewed herself. And to me, she was the most beautiful among the cousins. To me, I thought she was absolutely gorgeous. But I don't know. I know it affects Thandi, but I think that Thandi has to put it back there because she wants to know different. That's what it comes down to. She wants to know different, or at least see if it's different. But the rest is horrible.
Anybody else? Chapter 14. Question 14.
No. Question 14. No.
Yeah, question 14. I read some of the stuff that's up in 13.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're on question 14. Nobody? All right, let's move on. We've had Venita, we've had Kim. The third person in was Leonie. It's your choice, Leonie.
Okay. Let's look at number 10. Justice, accountability, and guilt are themes running through chapter 29. The justice Charles delivered to Clover, the price he will pay for exacting that justice, and the guilt he feels believing he is responsible for killing a man, as well as the guilt Verdine carries due to her ambivalence about her father's passing. Have you ever seen what guilt can do to a person? What did it look like?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Anybody?
Okay, I will say that what does guilt look like? Oh, guilt has so many faces. It can look so many different ways. Right. So guilt could look like a crazy ass president who it's a mediocre white male who's just rambling and sitting in the craziness, inciting violence, but guilty nonetheless, I think, and he's aware of that. And then guilt can be a very interesting thing. It can torment a person. Guilt guilt is sometimes not noticeable. Sometimes guilt makes us act out. I think about when we talk about Thandi, and I'm thinking about where Dennis-Benn was going in as much as contributing to Black girlhood, our conceptualizations of Black girlhood. Um, so I'm thinking about like the guilt she carried, right? This idea that she somehow owed Dolores and Margot, and needed to sacrifice her own dreams of perhaps someday becoming an artist, um, to do the STEM thing, become a medical doctor, something that's not only prestigious, but it will ensure, at least a decent living in America. So I think about Thandi carrying that kind of that burden and the guilt of knowing that she was not being true to herself. And it makes me love with this character even more, right? Because that is quite a load to carry at such a young age. And I'm thinking about how Tandi's guilt, how it actually contrasts starkly Dolores's guilt. I don't know about you all, but I am reading a semblance of Dolores owning kind of her guilt there. Do you all agree? Like she's trying to come to terms with, okay, here's what I did. And interestingly, I have been reading some Audre Lorde, and I thought about this text, and I thought about, us being in community and dialogue around this text. And Lorde, in one of her poems, she said something to the extent, I'll have to type it in the group chat in a moment. I'll get the quote. And I said I wasn't going to forget it because I wanted to share it. But she was saying, like, basically, no matter what, that an island woman, has seen, regardless of what people see and experience that appears to be detrimental, an island woman has seen so much worse. Like it doesn't even match. And I cannot get past how that spoke to me, and how it continues to speak to me about Dolores's character. So, and I'll just say that I'm just thinking through processing. I love that question and guilt. Thandi, Dolores. I'm just really looking at those characters. I mean, we could go further. We could think about Verdine and so forth, but I'll just stop there. Processing guilt and those two characters.
Thank you. All right. Anybody else? Question 10.
Yeah. It's interesting because, part of this question is the justice that Charles delivered to Clover and the price that he will pay for exacting that justice. And I don't consider the price that Charles is paying to be linked in any way to justice, because I don't think that Charles will be paying a consequence at all if the money wasn't a factor. I think it's so clouded what people are doing that if people actually knew what why Charles did what he did, that they wouldn't be chasing after him for anything. So for me, it's just it speaks to the depth of the desperation that people have, and also to the dehumanization of Charles and of a human being, in that he's seen by all sides as an opportunity or an obstacle. And that actually, it disappears from the story, what actually has happened to Thandi. Only Charles and Thandi hold that story still.
But do you feel like that's the justice that Margot desired? I'm wondering if Margot would have wanted someone like someone who could have prevented some of, the sexual assault against Margot's body would have been Dolores for sure. But I'm also wondering if, if somewhere, and I'm reading certainly something that's probably not there at all. I was just wondering, like, if that had happened, if a man had, in all his burgeoning masculinity and the ways in which Charles is beginning to construct masculinity for himself and define what it means to be a man, But I'm wondering, like, if someone would have done that for Margot, if someone would have tried to beat the uncle's ass, I mean, and I know that the secret obviously was not out, but I'm just wondering, like, how would Margot's character have changed if some man had come to her rescue that way? And what that must have said to Thandi, even though she's trying to explain to Charles that, oh no, it was a while ago. Oh, it's quite okay. She didn't really want those consequences. But for somebody, and all his young, youthful rawness, to say, no, you're worth protecting. Even if, I lose my freedom, because I protected you, you are worth that. Mm-hmm. I haven't really been sitting.
I think before you got here, I was already saying, how I think how sexy it is for a man to beat somebody up over you, and as tragic as the consequences are. But you just said for a man, and I just want to add, or a woman, because in the chapter where Charles had gone to Verdine's house and she was taking care of his wounds, and she got him to say, that he really did love her at Thandi. And Verdine said, well, if somebody I love, I'd have beat their ass too. Mm-hmm. So I do think there's something about wanting to have somebody strong enough in our life to hold the perp accountable, whoever it is. In the scene where Margot is choking the shit out of Dolores, she stops short of killing her because at some level she's still yearning for her mother's love. She wanted her mother to be the person that protected her. Dolores is not capable of that, but the desire for a protector, is still there after all that she's been through.
Well, we've seen examples of that all the time. I don't know a lot of Dolores's personally, but we've seen examples of that here, where a child will be abused terribly, terribly, or neglected, and they still want their mommy.
Mm-hmm.
And I've witnessed here, because there's something about the mother's love that nothing can replace that. Unfortunately, I think Margot stopped short. She should have choked the shit out of her. But thank goodness that mother love kicked in. You know, because I'm tired of Dolores and nasty stuff that she said, whether she's damaged or not. You know, Dolores is just, as Nicole would say, monstrous. You know, to the point where I'm like, when I'm reading it, you know, I can't even get through the things that she said even to Thandi when she's talking about Charles. And nobody wants a black girl. The whole time I'm sweating. Trying to, and it's not even me, but you can feel it in yourself. It's like, oh my God, Lord Jesus. Oh, you don't want to choke her. You just want to go away. You just want her to go away. And you might choke her to make her go away because it's too much. The stuff that she says. Did you feel that, Nicole, when you read it? Like the stuff. It was so like, it was hitting me out the pages. I was like, oh. I can imagine being in that room. You know, right. She can really invoke some anger to the point where you have to catch yourself like Margot did. Margot did good. She did very well. I'm proud of Margot. Because my heart was racing. I'm sorry, ladies. That part was just too much for me. I was just sweating while I was reading. I'm like, Lord Jesus.
It was intense. She's a prolific writer. For her fight scenes, I was just as interested in the male on male fight scene as I was the woman on woman, you know?
Yeah.
So it draws you in, you know, and so, that's the craft. That's really writer's craft.
I was certainly sweating. I'm telling you, the whole time I couldn't even breathe. Just trying to contain myself. Like, choke him, Margot, choke him. All right, Margot, stop. You don't want to go to jail.
All right. Anybody else on question 10? No? Okay. Gio, it's your turn to pick a question. What's your pleasure?
Okay. Let's see. Okay, let's do question number 9. Tending to Charles's wounds, Verdine uses a script passed down to her from her mother, Miss Ella. Do you hear your mother's voice in your head or see her influence in how you move through the world?
Yeah. Anybody on 9? Thanks, Nicole.
Well, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I see a lot of reflection going on out there in people's faces. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, Nicole.
So that was such an interesting question. So I definitely see my mother's influence in how I move through the world. Like, I don't even think there is a vocabulary grand enough for me to just praise my mother. I have said before, my mother is 4 feet 11 inches tall, but she's a powerhouse. And I think in particular, what I love, what I have grown to really adore. I've always loved that my mother has an interesting patience. And what I've learned to adore, and I would question it more so when I was younger, but this idea of her, I would see it as, okay, you're putting yourself last. You're doing this far too much, But what I've come to understand is that there is this embedded, ingrained belief that my mother operates from, that whatever she's supposed to have and whatever successes or whatever she's going to enjoy in life, it's going to happen. And she's not so anxious about how it will unfold. And as I age, I see myself, getting there. So I'm moving differently through the world. And it's so interesting how at times I can see it mirrors, her path. I'm moving differently in the sense of I'm understanding how complete incomplete journeys can be sometimes. And that I'm starting to sense the spiritual journey more so. And so I'm just really I'm very grateful. I am extremely grateful to have been blessed with that woman, as my mother.
Beautiful. Save that for Mother's Day. Anybody else? Your mama's voice.
Well, I don't hear my mother's voice, but I hear my godmother's voice, which I was very, very close to. That was during the day when you were baptized into, you went through the whole formal, you're an infant, and she was really filled the godmother role, actually mother role, for the most part. And I always remember her saying, "Pooch, it doesn't have to be you. If you don't do it, somebody else will. So let them." That was one of those conversations where, it was to keep you out of negative situations. Don't fall prey. It doesn't have to be you, Don't be a follower, make your own decisions. And I hear her voice all the time. I spent a great deal of my time with her. Although I live with my mother, I spent a great deal of time with my godmother, and she was born in 1903.
Wow.
So I have a lot of stories. She was more mature when she became my godparents. Her and my godfather never had children. So they were very mature people anyway. And the things that she told me today, I've always used them throughout my life. Something will come, whether something's not clear to me, whether I need to make a decision, whether I'm questioning something, I always hear her. She had, I guess for her time, that was on the front of her mind all the time. Don't fall prey. So she had a lot of sayings for don't fall prey, walk away, be the first person to leave the room. If it doesn't look good, it's not good. She had all these. Pretty cool. Those are my fond memories of my godmother. Yeah, pretty cool. She was cool.
I hear my mother's voice all the time. In fact, you all hear my mother's voice too, because I sound just like her. And even though I still think that our personalities are very different in a lot of ways. I have that experience a lot of daughters have of being like my mother, despite my best efforts not to. You know? But like your godmother, she was full of those little sayings, little wittitudes, and even though I would get frustrated with her because she was not one, she wouldn't sit down in a dialogue like this. That was not her thing. And so I would get frustrated with her for that kind of a reason. But she was always dropping those little sayings, and they stuck. Not all of them, but a lot of them stuck. The faith of a mustard seed, all of that stuff. I mean, one of the things that I posted today was it's a Wordsworth poem with the line in it, "Into each life some rain must fall." And I posted Ella Fitzgerald singing the song by that title. But I know in the back of my head, that's one of the expressions that my mother would use, growing up. And so, yeah, she's been gone. She passed in 2006. So, it's been a minute now. But in a lot of ways, it feels like she's still right here because she's all up in my head. And I talk to her whenever I want to.
That is so beautiful, Michelle. That is beautiful.
She's in my head too. She was my idol. I told you. Yes, and Michelle sounds like her mother, but Mrs. Odom had a little more rasp. No, I could do Mrs. Odom, okay, because that's my girl. But she had a little more rasp to her voice, a little more, and she didn't talk. Michelle's more talkative, but she used to just pull those words. I'm sorry, I get into the whole logo thing. Go ahead, y'all. Michelle knows I was getting to the, I adored her. I just like all that she had with her. So go ahead, ladies. I get into my whole character.
All right. Anybody else on question 9? Gio, Kim, Leonie?
I guess for me, I am so much sweeter than my mother, and she hated this about me. She just thought that I should have been this warrior chick like she was, and I think my mother actually enjoyed kicking ass. I just think that she was just this chick that if something was going wrong in the movement, they would call her and she would come and bring the heat. And I remember one time I was at school and the teacher said to me, "I get paid whether you learn or not." So I mentioned this to my mother. My mother was at that school and she cursed this woman up and down the classroom. And so I remember one of the teachers accosted me for my daughter and she said, "Your daughter doesn't belong in my class. She's slowing the class down." So Miss Rainbows and unicorns over here, I reverted exactly into my mother. And I just said to her, I said, "You know how I go on all the class trips and I bake the cookies and everything for the bake sale? I said, I only do that because my daughter's here. I do that because she's in the building. So if you think you're going to mess with her, I'm going to turn on you. I'm going to turn on you hard. So you're going to teach her." And so she was shaking in her boots because I hadn't realized how much I had threatened her until she looked at me. And I said, "Always remember, I don't come in here because I like anybody in this whole building except for that girl. So don't ever get it twisted again." So.
Okay. You can't be holding my breath, and I'm not even a teacher.
I may not have the firearms that my mother had, but you mess with my kid. And Odom comes right out. She comes right out.
Oh
So
my goodness.
I wish I had more soft, sweet things to say about my mom. I don't. But
That's okay.
you know, it's funny. I always used to say, and we used to say that my mother was more the father in our house. Like she was just. I think she considered herself, I guess, a feminist, and she just wasn't having it. She just didn't see the need to be that sweet, soft thing where I do, and that's what I've been to my kid, as soft as possible. So I hope if my daughter's ever on the line that she'll say, "Oh, my mom is sweet." Okay, this is the last thing I'll say. I know that I'm lying because my daughter's gonna say that she's seen a lot of those more of those moments where I'm my mother that I'm actually comfortable with. She's seen a lot of them.
Yeah, my mom was sweet, and that's what pissed me off.
No! Oh, I wish I had your mom. Oh.
Okay. Well, my mom was a Gemini. Okay, I was gonna say my mom was a Gemini, so she was both of those. She was the gun toter, razor carrying, and she was sweet. If you caught her on the wrong day, it was the wrong day for you.
Wow.
I
and are you like that?
As I get older, yes, because I give less fucks than I did before.
There you go. Clap for you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just not carrying that razor in my brow, okay? I'm not doing that. Because I'm well aware of the incarceration system is not as forgiving as it was when my mom was coming through, when she used to hang a Negro for, just breathing wrong, or she felt some sort of way she was going down memory lane and you popped up. Oh, shit. Don't do it. And then she would revert to the Bible, told him, yes, Jesus, I had to put you up on the shelf, but so-and-so needed hanging. And if you didn't want me to hang him, you shouldn't have let him go coming to my path. That was her reasoning. So, oh my goodness. But yeah, she was just a wonderful conglomerate of personalities. So, and I often hear her voice in my head, especially as I get older. But most often when I have problems and I'm like, who should I attack this problem as? Me or Jesse? And then I have to say, well, if I pick Jesse, I got to set a limitation because Mama had no limitations. She was taking it, all the way. Oh, don't get her started. She going all the way. It wasn't just I'm gonna cuss you out. No, I'm cussing you out, and then I'm following it up with something to make you remember me for the rest of your life. So yeah, no, I don't plan to be behind bars at all. So I'll be using the stand your ground law we have here to my advantage. Mama, she ain't truck with that. She would go out in the street and find you, okay? Because you did something.
Okay.
Accountability.
Yes. She was bringing justice. It makes me think about Sylvester Stallone's movie. Oh, what was that? Where he was the futuristic cop and he would say, "I am the law." Well, that was Jesse. She was bringing the law, okay? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, we need those folks. We need them.
Yeah, there was a place, for that. It made people be really excited to see the gentle side because they didn't want to see the bad side. So there's a place for Malcolm and there's a place for Reverend King, Dr. King. So yes, but not in the same body. No, don't do it, Jesse. No.
Stop.
That's all I got.
Leonie, any mama reflections?
Yeah, I don't often have her voice in my head. I think by the time I came around, my family talks about my mom kind of like before and after my father. And she was just tired. And I think she found a lot of comfort in religion. And we weren't like heavily engaged with each other. There was no animosity there. There wasn't any hostility there. But she's also not the place where I've gotten most of my lessons so far.
Where's that place?
Largely through experience, through experimentation. And I think if I were more of my mother's daughter, I would have a much smaller life. I think that part of that my growth and a lot of the things that I know about myself is because I've been pushed or taken risk to go beyond what was known.
Good for you. Good. Yeah. It's always good if we can find somebody to kind of mentor us because, I just don't believe that one person can ever give us everything that we need, be it a mama, a papa, a lover, a mate. You all have heard me say multiple times that I really do believe we need and are supposed to have multiple people in our lives. And so what you don't get in one place, you will hopefully get someplace else. One of the posts that I did today related to the book group included links to the story of Tony Robbins, the life coach, and a story about Bob Marley. Both of them were on that Goldcast program that kind of does these positive stories about people. And so the link that I was making to the text was that into each life some rain must fall, and we all seem to get it in one way or another, and sometimes we're able to turn those negative experiences, the kind that Dolores and Margot and Thandi have had, and do something really positive in our lives. But a lot of times making that leap from the tragic to the miraculous comes from the connections we've made in our lives, the mentors and the angels and the people who were perfect strangers that have helped us see something another way. So it's important to be open to that. All right, anybody else? Did we get everybody on question 9? All right, Nicole, it's your turn to choose a question. We've done 3, 14, 10, and 9.
Okay. Man, these questions are so good. Okay. Why don't I go back to look ahead? So let's go to number 2. Margot suggests Dolores should ask Grandma Merle where Thandi is. Did you ask Grandma? Margot asked, looking at the old woman, her eyes narrowing. Maybe she saw something. She sees everything, ask her how many things she lets happen and say nothing. Why is Margot angry with Grandma Merle? And do you think that anger is justified?
Well, I think that this goes to what you were getting at earlier, Nicole, about having somebody there to be your protector. And so Margot probably believes that Grandma Merle did see what was happening to her and did nothing. In the same way that Margot could see the bruises on Grandma Merle after Dolores jacked her up and said nothing. And so while I think that anger is justifiable or understandable, what I see in this very dysfunctional family is just some very old and deep wounds that they just can't seem to figure out how to stop inflicting on each other from generation to generation. So while I think Margot's feelings of anger, she has a right, those are reasonable feelings, but I wish that somebody in that family would say, we've got to stop the madness.
I think it's an interesting question if like anger is right or justified. Mm-hmm. It is a feeling. And for me, the question that comes to mind is like, is anger useful? Is her anger useful? Because, yeah, anyone could feel anger and it's there for all kinds of reasons. But it's like, when I sit back and I think, you have what looks like passivity, but probably is layered with many, many, many things for the grandmother, and passivity layered with many, many things from the mother. And you have Margot, who's like this whirlwind of action. And I don't know whether or not there's actual movement. It's like there's all this activity, but is she getting anywhere? So it's like, has that anger actually produced anything that's useful? Is the question that kind of comes to mind. Because I just, when I sit there and I think, like, all this activity that Margot has generated around herself, that we haven't finished the book yet, but it's kind of like really getting the sense that, like, I don't know where this is going and if it's actually going to go anywhere. If it's actually producing anything. Yeah. So I think like anger can be, I think I would not look at the question of anger being justified, but it being useful. And I think that anger can be useful because if you dig deeply to the why of it, you can get to a place of understanding and maybe from there grow. And I'm not seeing that happening. There's just, these women are just like constantly triggering each other. And they're in environments that are triggering and that are dehumanizing. And there isn't like the space or the capacity or the skill to be able to go beyond the feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It seems like the grandmother lost her mind and her voice once her son left. And he left because he found the money. And so it seems like she turns a blind eye to female pain. That she was the one that says it's the male child that's the only one that's important here. So for her to almost give up her own soul because her son is gone, but she didn't do or say anything when if she came upon any violence or abuse in her own home with her daughter or her granddaughters. Because if the money's gone, I'm sure the grandmother knew where the money was coming from.
Right. Right. Thank you.
I mean, but does that not speak to the depth of Margot's kind of, I guess, vengeance, if you will? Because then Margot would have known that the grandmother fully expected to leave with the son, right? So she gets the son out of the home, and Merle stays, whom I took this Margot's accusation as, Merle knew all along what was happening between the uncle and Margot. So she disrupts this space. So she removes him. Merle has this very visceral reaction to his leaving. Dolores is pissed because the money is gone. And, Margot's always been a master. It just keeps
Margot what?
It kind of been a mastermind, so it keeps, I think Dennis-Benn keeps kind of reiterating to the reader that if the infrastructures of that community, of the nation state, shall I say, could have supported at that time, Margot's, her giftedness. I really think that we are looking at a gifted woman who did not have the support, who could, she likes to be called boss lady. I like to kind of refer to that, who really could have been, a badass boss lady. If the support had been there. But yeah, it makes me think if she was younger and Margot was exacting that revenge, just like that and in that order. So, I mean, this character to me, what can I say? Dennis-Benn she just never ceases to amaze me with the complexity of the characters.
Thank you. Anybody else? Question 2. No? Okay, well, I want to get one. I want to jump down to 15. Oh, boy. This is hard. I kind of outdid myself.
Good questions. They're really good.
Oh, no. I'm thinking 15. But all right, let's go with 15. Margot, boss lady, does not appreciate being threatened by Gillette's sweetness, and her efforts to woo the girl back to work quickly turn hostile when Sweetness threatens to expose the scam on Miss Novia Scott Henry if she doesn't call off the reward on Charles's head. You think because you give good pussy that you have a voice, that you is worthy of an opinion? You'll never talk to the Alfonsos of this world without being laughed at. To them, you're a servant. It will always be a servant. Is Margot sounding just like Dolores? Is Margot right about this? Will they always be servants? And what is more important than what other people think of us?
I think the difficulty there is what happens when a country or a nation declares its independence, and yet the yoke of colonialism, they're still tied in that residue. The residue of colonialism is still present, right? What is a future? What would a future, or what would Jamaica? How could we even imagine a Jamaica and without, or any of our nations throughout the diaspora, motherland, even, which is why Wakanda is so important when we start talking about the Black imagination. What could these places and spaces have been? I mean, of course, colonialism, racialization, those kind of cool projects help to disperse Black bodies to these spaces. But what would happen, or what would these spaces, what would they resemble, shall I say, if those nations were not dealing with a debt that is very cruel, harsh, and unfair? Speaking specifically IMF and other issues. I can't even imagine. So when we talk about, this notion of them all to always be a servant, that is like almost a quintessential unifying definition of Blackness, right? To serve, to be a servant, to be in this, whether it's late capitalism, early capitalism, the capitalistic project has been to ensure European survival to the detriment of darker skinned people. And we even note how white adjacent individuals can even capitalize on our that cruelty and the struggle. So I love the way you worded that, Michelle, and it was just rhetorically just very powerful for me to read those words and to always be a servant. Because so far, that's what Blackness is. It's what Blackness does. It does not matter if Blackness is, in Kenya or South Africa or Houston, Texas, or, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago. It does not matter. We are occupying, by and large, these spaces that are, a project dehumanization, and it's designed for, again, European dominance. But in particular, what's more important than what other people think of us? I think that's why when we look at our movements, they are so very important. Black arts, Black power, civil rights, and other movements that were cross-cultural and, in, through, without, local, transnational, the diaspora, because we recognize that we need a knowledge of self. We recognize, yeah, I like that, Kim, absolutely. We recognize that we need to be able to imagine ourselves first and foremost as whole, as human. But I even in 21st century 2018, I still feel so very disheartened And which is why books like this are sorely needed. We're, no one has to announce that we're not there yet. But great question.
Great response.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anybody else? Question 15.
I feel so aligned with what you shared, Nicole, because I think what I'm kind of getting, I'm closer now to having language to what I see as the experience of Black people around the world, which is that so many of us are on land, but we don't have countries. Like there isn't, it's like you're African American and you're in the United States, so you're on this piece of land, but like there isn't like real citizenship available here. It's like even a country like Jamaica, there's like land. They're on a place. They even have a label that's like, of their own. And it's like there's not really a country there. Like in that. So it's one thing to know that your existence has been, so much of your history has been, that you're divorced from your history because of because that is the project of slavery. Like I said, I've been in this nonviolence intensive. And one of the things that was said that I was just like, whoa, it's like slavery was never about free labor. It was about having a right to a life. And that's what so many Black people have in common, is that right was taken away from us. So it's like, because the point that was being made was that slavery is a very common technology, actually, amongst many human civilizations. Very common to use labor to take away the rights of people, to dehumanize people, right? And to say that you are subhuman, less than in some way, not like one of us. And when I look at my experience of many of the books that we've read, including this book, and when I look at this question, it's just like this, and what you shared, Nicole, that is the truth. Like we're all in the same boat. We may have different labels, but like this is what the face of Blackness looks like, which is that there's not really an identity to hold on to, which in and of itself is tragic, but there's also, it's really hard to grasp one because we're still in the throes of being there to serve a European agenda, regardless of where we live.
Yeah.
And what we call ourselves.
Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like, I don't know, are all Jamaicans still servants? I'm asking that as a question, but I might just be avoiding making it as a statement because I think it might be true. And are all African Americans, are all, like, when you think of it in the larger picture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Well, I want to just kind of come at that from a slightly different angle. Certainly, there's no argument about the Black experience worldwide, the predicament that we're in. But I think it's always important to remind ourselves that we have little to no control over what other people do or how they see us, what they think of us, any of that. And we maybe have a little bit more control over what we do as individuals, what we do as a community, how we think of ourselves. And I say only a little more because I do think that that it's possible to change ourselves, but that it's not necessarily easy. You know, awareness is a part of it, but it's not the whole of it. It's hard stuff. But I think that these kinds of messages that are like contagions that we give ourselves, like nobody's gonna ever love a Black girl, that you don't matter, that Black lives don't matter, that you are a servant, always were a servant, always will be a servant. You know, all of the kinds of thought patterns that help to keep us in a cycle. I think we maybe have a little bit of control over, but we have to get a grip. So for me, what is more important than what other people think of us is really what we think of ourselves.
I think the difficulty is, though, at least when we're talking about public sphere, accessing the public sphere and being, you know, a Black person, there is still also a battle of other people's perceptions, right? There's a constant, like Du Bois indicates, a worry that we are, you know, if we choose to fight. Hence why, you know, we see these state-sanctioned executions, and I absolutely don't even understand how Black people how are we surviving? Like, I can't even take another state-sanctioned execution depicted and conveyed, communicated, circulated via technology, via viral video, via social media. Like, I can't even take another one. And it's so interesting. You see Black people from the motherland saying, we are praying for our Black American brothers and sisters. You know, it's horrific. It's horrendous. It is a knowing, and I'm trying to remember, like when I delve into my own kind of history, I'm trying to remember at what age did I know? When did I know there was a difference? When did I know that white girls were afforded a different kind of protection and looked at it in a different kind of way? When did I become aware of that? I try to gauge that with my own children, because obviously perhaps the mixed blessing for me was that I did attend very urban, working class, racially segregated schools. So I didn't have to deal with, I mean, we had issues, you know, regarding colorism, but for the most part, we were all Black in my school. So I think, yes, it is. There is, like Michelle, like you're saying, what do we think of ourselves? But there's also like some stuff that I didn't ask for, that I'm still constantly battling, you know? The fact that I can, when I'm in public spaces, that just being a Black woman means, you know, I'm gonna be watched a lot of times. or like criminality is always already etched onto my flesh, my body. I'm treated, like a fugitive slave. Sometimes,
Absolutely.
these
Absolutely.
perceptions that we battle. So it's like, and then to think that you're very survivable depends a lot of times, split second decisions. Um, how do you exist? How does Blackness exist in the figment of a white person's imagination?
Right.
Those are the kind of things like we can't, and it's impossible to account for. So yes, I definitely agree. Like, we've got to see ourselves differently, but we also should not be burdened with doing all this work when they've got to see us differently. I'm sorry, you all, my house phone is ringing.
We should not be. I mean, and none of us ask for this, and none of us want to have to deal with this. But it comes with the package, with the skin we're in. And so what I'm trying to get at, and when I'm wearing my other hat, I like to talk about the topic of revolutionary love. What I'm trying to get at is we cannot keep having stories like the stories that we see in the lives of Dolores and Margot and Thandi and Verdine. We cannot keep treating each other in these monstrous ways and expect that we are somehow going to want to have the unity in order to stand up to all of these outside forces of oppression. We can't be oppressing each other and fighting off an external oppressor at the same time. And so I'm just saying, I think we have a little more control over what goes on inside our own home than we do. That wasn't true for Stephon Clark, I have to tell you. But we have a little more control what goes on inside our own home than we do out in the street, where we know we have no control, where we know we are hated, where we know they look at us, a 10-year-old boy, they see, a 500-pound monster. We can't control that. But we can control whether or not we are telling our children, you ain't shit, you never was, you never will be shit. We don't have to give that message to our children when we know our children are going to get that message in the street.
There you go.
That's what I'm trying to say, Nicole.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
We learn how to control the controllables.
Right.
And I understand, as Leonie said earlier, there was no capacity in Dolores's household. There was no capacity in that country to do any better than they did.
Right, and it's deliberate.
But the people that fucked us up are not going to be the people to come along and solve our problems. I promise you that.
Yeah, that's true. But the problem is, but I still think our gaze has to remain, I don't say fixated, but within the scope of, or when we consider, possibilities. There is no way that I can let the colonial structure, that structural oppression off the hook, because once again, as Leonie stated, Dolores is by and large who they've made her become. She is, you don't survive that by being in your emotions and your feelings. You don't survive that by, there's no humanization. There's not a humanizing process. And so you don't survive that kind of, let's call it what it is. It's domestic terror, right? It is a social death. It is what Orlando Patterson says. It is to watch a people die.
But did she survive? Did she survive?
But the problem is she's not intact. That's not wholesome. She's not intact. Like there's a clear mind-body split. There's no question of duality with Dolores. There's a clear mind-body split. Dolores's body has survived, right? In a very liminal way. But Dolores's mental capacity, her emotional capacity, it is so very limited. I would even say non-existent. But Dolores is exactly who they made her become. And I do say, and I'm not trying to say that, some responsibility, Dolores should take some responsibility. So I could see that argument. But Dolores has, when she says to Thandi, nobody, a Black girl, the difference is the shade. The difference is Thundi's dad, Thandi has the curly hair, right? She doesn't have the kinky hair, am I correct? And Thandi is a fairly, I would guess, I know it's clear Margot is attractive. She's dark skinned. Thandi is somewhat, I read her as attractive as well, right? Mm-hmm. That's not even that Dolores, she just knows she's ugly, right? She says society has made her believe she's ugly. And what I'm saying is that, but these are creatures, just like Ronald Reagan made a welfare queen, that his rhetoric made some Black women refashion them into welfare. Dolores is this monstrous mother, and in some ways this, an unrecognizable human being. But I cannot let powers that be off the hook, because this is who, she's largely what they've made her become. She to struggle to not know, you gotta sell, selling these wares to survive, and conditions that are living in conditions that are just deplorable. At some point, most people start to believe, the environment has a way of shaping the psyche. This is why our projects are, by and large in America, failed experiments, right? Because those who live in the project have grown up believing, I'm not shit, gonna never be shit, not worth shit, and they act it out. When are these faces? So we have these oppressive structures, and then there's capital behind. When are these people held accountable? And yes, and I guess the question would be, what would rehabilitation for Dolores look like? I guess that's the question. How do you get a woman like Dolores?
Another question is, who is it that is going to hold these oppressive forces accountable?
Exactly.
And are they going to gain the capacity to be able to hold anybody accountable?
Mm-hmm. And that's the problem.
You can't look at individuals when systems are the problem.
Absolutely.
You may have individual people who can thrive, who could find ways of thriving. Doesn't change the fact that the system is the problem.
Yes.
So it really, you really do have to be a magical Negro to get beyond it. That is the truth.
Hence why when, a lot of times when you look at, even if I could just place this in a national frame, we look at a lot of our upper middle class Blacks. I mean, things are changing, right? But certainly we could see the dynamics of colorism there. This is nothing but plantation economics, right? That these lighter skinned people could have some, that privilege that having lighter skin, being like right close to white, affords them. So I think you're absolutely right, Leonie, that the system is larger than Dolores, than Margot, than Thandi, than Charles. What I don't even like after reading these chapters, like I've been pissed off and I've been upset with Dolores. But I have also had to have some sense of compassion as well.
Come join me on this side, Nicole. I work.
Yeah, because it is just this function, and I look and we live it, right? As we all blackness means that you are living it. And if you are able to rise above in some way, there is still, you could get the wealth, right? You get the wealth, but you're still Black. So there is still this way that we are reminded of, or the way that people want us to believe, like there's some kind of abnormality associated with Blackness. It has not changed. I mean, it's just, it keeps occurring.
And it's not going to change. That's what I'm telling you. The external stuff is not going to change, and we don't have any power to change it.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying let them off the hook. I'm not saying they're not accountable. I'm not saying they're not responsible. They did it.
Yeah.
And they're still doing it.
And they don't have to pay for it.
I think they're not
going to do it willingly. They're not going to do it of their own volition.
No, they're not. It's going to take revolution. It's going to take that like consistency of like waking, because it's almost like when Donald Trump got elected, it's like people are like, oh, things haven't changed that much. That's you becoming awake for something, for a condition that was consistent. It always existed. Yes. You allowed yourself to be blinded to it.
Yes.
So it's like the point now is to like never let go of the truth that is in front of you, because the only way that it's going to come about is through some kind of revolution. I think it has to be a peaceful one, because otherwise the whole world will burn down. Right. And that there has to, because systems can change. Like one of the points that somebody brought up today was the fact that like slavery wasn't that long ago, like in terms of the enslavement of African American people, or African peoples, rather. And already we're at the point that we are now, which is fairly, in terms of, actually not even so much us, but the way that slavery is held now is very different in a relatively short amount of time. So we have to like be aware of that and know that things can shift and can change. Mm-hmm. But it will take our being active in making that change for it to happen. Right. Because the other thing too is that if things even were to go on the way that they are, there is an end to this. The planets, just looking at the planet alone, it cannot withstand a lot more of this kind of capitalism. Like it cannot survive.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I see too is on the kind of the
wait a minute, Nicole. Is there anybody else that wanted to say anything about question 15?
I do. I don't see that this is a debate. I think that Leonie and Nicole what they're saying is true, it's accurate. But I'm with you, Michelle. I think that there is a power that we have in how we define ourselves and how we mirror our children and our communities that starts a revolution. And if you don't have that, your revolution will fail. And if you are only focusing on the enemy, you do not take advantage of your own power and your own grace. So I don't disagree with anything in terms of the systematic nature of colonialism and capitalism and racism because I saw it all day today. But at the same time, I heard the stories of black men who sat in that chair. Each one of them did not know who they were and made themselves prey to a system that they may have been able to avoid had someone said something different to them. And so I think that we need to take back our culture. This culture that we're living in. This is not our culture. And I think that I'm with you. I just think when you tell a child that they are a little so and so, or that they're this and they're that, and they have to spend so many years recovering from your words and recovering from what's going on in this country, oh no, looks like they're going to be in a cell next to the other people who've been talked to in that manner.
Right. Right. Thank you.
I agree with Michelle. I think my biggest fight, I am always ready for a revolution. It's my fight within my own race. That has been my biggest fight. My biggest fight. I'm ready for change. I've always lived for change. I saw enough, even being a child, as I told you, to know what I did not want to be. And all my life, I have made sure that that stayed right here. My fight has been within my own race. How dare you, bam, come down here. You want to make a change? No, come down here. You want to do it different the way we did in that? I find is my biggest struggle today. And we can find a way to love one another and communicate and stop pulling me back when I'm trying to change what I know is wrong and what you know is wrong. You know, that's my biggest struggle. And if I can find a way to do that, a good example is that child that just got murdered, that was shot in his grandmother's backyard.
What?
I think it was a family member. Was she a family member, Michelle?
Yeah.
That made the speech about his brother and his mental capacity. And the whole time she was shouting, what about mental health care? And I talked to Michelle. I said, who's she talking to? Who are you talking to? Because you're shouting out there, but you can't be shouting at the oppressor, wait for him to give you mental health care or the system to give you mental health care. Specifically, who are you talking to? Are you talking to our Black physicians that are psychiatrists and psychologists and analysts? So if you're not talking to them, who are you talking to? The white man system is not going to give us mental health care. And that's what I mean by, you understand, we have to look to ourselves. It was just, I always said I heard was a voice. And my question was, who are you talking to?
Yeah, I agree with
you. Say our Black healthcare professionals, we need you to volunteer some of your time because this is what our community needs. You got your money, you got your profession. Now we need you to lend your time. I don't hear that. Be specific. Call some names. Call out some people. We have those upper middle class Black folk that are sitting back and, you know, they're doing their thing and whatever they're doing. Call them out. You got an hour because this is what we need. So if we're more specific and willing to call people to be accountable like our own selves, because it's up to us to help us. It's up to us to help those that can't help themselves, that don't have the money or the means to help themselves. We're our Black professionals.
I agree with you, Venita, but I also think
Nicole, Nicole, I'm gonna give you the last word. Let me just check. Gio or Leonie, did you want to say anything else?
No,
nope.
I'm good.
No,
I'm good.
Okay, Nicole, take us out.
Okay, no, I'm saying I do agree with Venita, but I think the efforts have to go beyond the Black professional classes, right? Because the way capitalism works is the Black professional classes, a lot of them are, trying to repay student loan debt, have their, I mean, so yes, there is a way that we have to stop being servants to capitalism as a system, right? We saw that in When and Where I Enter with Black women, and ways that our unity is divided along lines of social class, going right back to how we are ushered into the capitalistic system. But I also think we have to get back to some of those old tried and true ways that a lot of times it was those old, even if you remove church out of this, right? But those old mothers in the church who go, and we talk about postpartum depression and infant mortality rates in our communities. They were the older mothers would go sit with younger women and things like that. And we have snubbed and turned our nose at tradition, right? For the modern. We want to, be ushered into modernity and the modern Black state so badly that we have forgotten about like those older communal collective ways of gathering, of taking care of each other, of just saying, okay, because I can even recall my grandmother would cook enough food. She had a friend who lived across the street, and she was very sick. Well, every night, my grandmother would have us, one of us would have to run across there. We would be scared, it's dark. But you had to do it because Aunt Jarlene had to eat. And Aunt Jarlene was not, my grandmother didn't see her as someone who was not a part of our family, just as her grandchildren needed to eat, some of her adult children, Aunt Jarlene needed to eat. I think we've got to find those ways. We've got to relearn how to be in community with each other. And so, yes, so I agree again, as I said, the Black professional class, but we've got to get back to some of those older ways. And I did like, I could just one slight comment, Venita. I did kind of like the rhetorical effect of her screaming. I do sometimes like Black women to perform rage in public spaces. I really like sometimes for white people to have to sit and listen and watch a performance of rage. To say because
He was down.
she was and the problem is she's saying y'all the ones who are, you're the councilmen, the politicians, the this, the that, the media, and y'all don't know what we've already figured out. Black folk are dealing with post-traumatic stress.
And let me just say for the tape. Let me just say for the tape, because I won't know what we're talking about when I get ready to make clips a year from now. We're talking about the relative of Stephon Clark, who was killed a couple of weeks ago in his grandmother's backyard, and his brother has taken on some fame in actions to it, including storming into a Sacramento city council meeting. And so his I think it's his cousin, the woman, I don't know her name, but she came out to defend the young man, who a lot of people have kind of been giggling at. And so she was identifying his behavior as needing mental health care.
And that's what I mean by professionals. I'm not putting all the weight on them. I'm talking specifically about our mental health care, which is this is the issue. And a lot of us can't afford it. We don't have health care. Even if you have health care, you can't afford it. And I'm just saying it's a good place to start. Maybe they can volunteer. We need street sweepers to volunteer. We need all kinds of people to sit around and talk to people, to hear people. But some of our professional people that are skilled and trained in that area, did you hear us? White folks hear us. They've been hearing us for a long time. They don't give a damn. I'm not talking to them no more. You know what I'm saying? Do you hear us? We need
I
some
like
help.
that.
We have hour that you can give. That's what I'm saying. Not take away from them, but they're there. Gifts, you know.
But it's got to be all hands on deck.
Everybody,
all hands on deck. If you could bake a pie, bake the pie. Whatever you can contribute to the culture of the community, that's your responsibility.
Take it on out, Kim and Nicole and Leonie.
Definitely. Well, ladies,
y'all got hot up here tonight. Y'all got
hot. That's Dolores' fault. She got folk all upset.
Somebody's one of those bulldozer. That's okay.
Come on, ladies. We can change the world. We are forced to be reckoned with. The local Black Women's Reading Circle. We are the force.
That's right.
All right. Okay. All right. Well, y'all have a good week, and we will see you next week reading our story together.
All right. Good night, ladies. Have a good week.